Ladies and gentlemen, Landyn here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. We're continuing with Atomic Habits, and today we're going to review Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is titled The Secret to Self-Control, and I can summarize this entire chapter up in 10 seconds. That could be the end of the YouTube video, so let's do it. The secret to self-control is to structure your life in a way that willpower and self-control are unnecessary. All right, everybody, this has been Landyn. Thanks for watching the video. We'll see you later. Still there, eh? All right, well, let's get into it then. So, after 16 years of the Vietnam War, the United States military brass came to the conclusion that somewhere between 15 and 20% of their servicemen abroad were addicted to heroin. So they built these big government programs that were going to bring all those boys back. They were going to get them all rehabilitated. And they brought them all back. And I think the stat was that in the next 3 years, only 12% of them ever relapsed, which means almost 90% didn't ever touch heroin again after coming back to their American soil. That's pretty cool. Now, how does James Clear describe that? Well, the way he describes it is that he said the context changed, so the habit changed. Now, if you watched my previous video, we talked about context, and what that basically was you have a cue that triggers a habit, and a context is a situation that associates that cue with the trigger. So, if you come home from work, and every day you sit on your couch and you drink beer and eat junk food, every time you sit on that couch, you're going to want to drink beer and eat junk food and watch TV and get fat. And that whole scenario, that whole living room experience becomes a context that would then trigger that bad habit in that case. So Chapter 7 seems to be more geared towards eliminating bad habits rather than building new habits. So bad habits are something that are called autocatalytic. In the book, James Clear describes that as the process feeding itself. Something like you feel bad, so you eat junk food, which makes you feel bad, and then you feel bad, and you eat junk food, which makes you feel bad. Say something like our television example. Watching television makes you feel sluggish and lazy, but after watching television, you don't have the energy to do anything else because you feel sluggish and lazy, so you watch more television. Autocatalytic. I describe that as a vicious cycle, right? There's a different version of that. It's called cue-induced wanting. That is something like you're anxious about your health, so you have a cigarette to calm your anxiety, which makes your health worse and your anxiety worse. And how do you handle that? Well, maybe you have another cigarette, right? That's called cue-induced wanting. That's a different version of a vicious cycle. And finally, as an example of kind of the bad habit ideas, cocaine addicts were shown, this is more in the kind of cue-induced wanting thing. Cocaine addicts were shown pictures of cocaine. These pictures were 33 milliseconds long. That's how long they showed the picture for. And the cocaine addicts didn't register that they were ever shown a picture, but did want their cocaine. So the brain didn't have time to pick up the register from the eyes that they had seen something, but the habit, like the part of the brain that knows that as a cue, like seeing the cocaine as a cue that like something's about to happen, we like it a lot, right? That part of the brain knew what that was and triggered a active craving for it. It's pretty crazy. So what does that mean for us? Let's go back to what I said at the beginning of the chapter, at the beginning of this video. You have to structure your environment in a way that means you don't have to rely on willpower and self-control. You have to structure your environment in a way that it blocks out and eliminates access to bad habits that you're trying to kick and fosters the growth of the new good habits that you're trying to start, right? James Clear describes this as saying you cannot forget old habits, generally. Once the mental grooves have been carved into your brain, it's almost impossible to remove them entirely, even if those old habits haven't been used in a long time. Now here's my words. Resistance is futile. It is far more reliable to cut the head off the snake and build an environment that works to eliminate those bad habits. Something like if you watch TV in bed and it causes you to stay up too late, take the TV out of the bedroom. I don't have a TV in my bedroom. My wife and I have a TV in our living room. That's it. Maybe I'll bring one down here one day as well, but we'll see. Every night before bed, there's these caramel popsicles that I like to enjoy. They're just delicious. And I keep them in the freezer. Now, anybody who's seen my even earlier videos than this Atomic Habit series knows that in the last 2 years, I lost 50 pounds. It's closer to 55 pounds, actually. I'm still losing weight, and I'm not even trying anymore, right? I have these popsicles in my freezer because I value them as a nice, tasty treat before I go to bed. But if they were causing a problem and I was binge eating them and getting fat, well, then the most logical solution to me would be to build an environment that didn't include those in my freezer. As in, I finish them and then I don't restock them. Then it's that much harder for me to get access to those things. So, if you remember from chapter 3, there was the 4 laws of behavior change. And the first law of the behavior change was make it obvious. That applies to creating new habits, good habits. But James Clear also laid out the inversion laws. So what is the inversion of the first law? What's the opposite of make it obvious? Was make it invisible. If you're trying to break a bad habit, make that habit invisible. And you will be much more likely to succeed. So, James Clear says in the end of the chapter that the secret to self-control is to make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad habits invisible. I'll quickly read the chapter summary since we're here. You can't really see the book anymore, but I've got it in front of me here. The inversion of the first law of behavior change is make it invisible. Once a habit is formed, it is unlikely to be forgotten. People with high self-control tend to spend less time in tempting situations. It is easier to avoid temptation than to resist it. Ooh, if I were going to do a second video on chapter 7 this week, which I might actually focus on that line right there, because that's powerful stuff. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. Finally, self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long one. That's an interesting thought too. I've heard that before. I've never really believed it, but as I get older, I tend to think more and more that that's actually correct. Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed this video. It's only Wednesday. I said that I was going to have a video out on Wednesday, I believe, in my last video. I said that. So that's really good. I'm proud of myself for actually sticking to my own self-imposed obligation on when I should be getting videos out. So, not just to pat myself on the back, I thank anybody who watches this video. If you've enjoyed it, if you've gotten any information out of it, if you found it relatable at all, give me a like, maybe subscribe, tell your friends about me, whatever. You can watch a bunch of my videos. There's quite a few of them now, I guess, probably 15 or 20. They are mostly just like this. And, you know, I'm pretty new at this, so I'm sure I'll look back at these in the future and say, wow, those were really bad. They sucked. But anyway, that's what's up. Once again, I'm Landyn. I'll catch you all later in the week. Bye-bye.